Hello, beautiful star family. Becca Bee here with Soul Based Life. I had an incredible opportunity to have a conversation with Kristen Braid from Soul Inspired. And we got to dive deep into how we start to recognize the places that we feel stuck. Now, I know many of you, as well as myself, have had experiences where we have really wanted to move towards a goal, create something, but it feels like there's some kind of phantom thing inside that keeps us blocked, keeps us feeling stuck, or keeps us feeling like we're doing loops and not actually reaching that goal. And as we got to go into this conversation, we really got to dive into the ancestors, how sometimes our ancestors' energy is actually influencing us, how some of the vibrations that are held within our body are holding us back. But most importantly, besides just looking at how we get stuck, we really started to explore how we can begin to unstuck ourselves by really becoming mindful to the body, paying attention to energy. So, without further ado, I'm very excited to share this conversation with you, and I invite you to stay all the way to the end. There is a very special offer for a Legacy of the Soul course that I would love to be able to invite you into.
Hey,
Kristen,
Becca.
it's so good to see you, honey.
I'm so excited to be here. It's been so long since we've had one of these chats. I'm excited to do another recording to put out there for folks to hear and listen to and hopefully get inspired from. So it should be exciting.
Absolutely. It feels like such a transformational time, like just right now. People I've been talking to, I'm sure people you've been connecting with, it just feels like right now there's a lot of endings and new beginnings, or at least transformation that is happening right now. I feel that with a lot of individuals right now. Have you been noticing that?
I do. The workshop that I have online, the Find Your Spark workshop, is just interesting how drawn people are to this idea of finding our spark again, and just how many people are feeling like they've lost their spark a little bit and are really curious about what it means to like get it back and to be living in purpose with meaning in our life and things like that. So it's, yeah, definitely people are asking those questions right now for sure.
So powerful, especially, astrologically, this time of year. It's such a profound and powerful time of year because as we get into the fall, this is really when we start to feel that thinning of the veil, that
Mm,
thinning of the energy, where we start to have a deeper connection to spirit, to source, to really even also feeling the ancestors. And I think
mm,
that's a huge energy on the planet right now, is that there is a lot of the ancestor stories that are coming up to be recognized, to be witnessed, and that we have the opportunity right now to go like, awesome. I hear these stories, and we can see, in some ways a lot of the different things that are happening in the world right now, which could bring up a lot of fear for individuals, as far as, are we just going to go back into some of these stories again? Is it going to repeat forever? And I'm finding the opposite with individuals, where it's like you're saying, it's kind of like, no, let's rewrite this story. Let's find that spark. And so, how can we honor the energy of the ancestors of the past, find those greatest gifts inside, while we become the future ancestors
mm.
and create the new spark into the future? So I'm watching people on a massive level start to really step up and have the courage to really start to let go of things that
Mhm.
have been potentially burdening for the entire life, or maybe even generations.
Wow. Yeah, huge time for transformation. What I hear when or what I feel when I hear you saying that, it's like a time of empowerment, right? Of stepping up into our power and what do we have the power to change? And what intentions do we want to set to be able to create the change that we want to see in the world?
Change is the key word, isn't it?
Well, and it's getting comfortable with change, right? Change can be scary. And I think that's one of the things that holds us back a little bit in our nervous system, is that there's a safety that comes in our body and in our nervous system of sameness. Even if it's, for the better or for worse, we get comfortable in our sameness over time, right? And it can be scary to change things, these ancestral patterns you talk about about, they've been patterns that we've been stuck in for centuries, some of them, right? And it's a time right now where we're starting to question things more of, does it still have to be the same way? And I do believe that as we go inward, there's that age old saying of like, be the change you want to see in the world, right? And it's as we go inward to see what needs to change within ourselves, we become a living, breathing example of what it is that we want to see shift. And it happens one person at a time. And when we take that journey inward, it does impact the whole world. It's not just about ourselves. It does impact the whole world when we're walking through the world with a different energy within us. So yeah, we have the power to take that journey and to step onto it if we wish to.
Absolutely. And I know we both have a couple courses that we are um, so excited to be sharing with individuals right now. And I would just be curious. I know you were saying you have this amazing course, Find Your Spark Journey.
Yeah.
I'd love to know a little bit more about that because it sounds like exactly the path or a blueprint, if you will, for really helping individuals find that change or begin to discover what is keeping them from that change they want to create.
Yeah. Yeah. So the program that I've created and I'll be launching this month actually is the Find Your Spark Journey, like you said. And it's really a journey back to ourselves. So many programs out there are about what do you want to bring into your life and what do you want to manifest in your life? And for me, it's not so much about, what house do I want or where do I want to live or that. It's more about taking people inward to really get to know themselves so that we can stand in our authentic power. And as we hit midlife, it's a time where we just start to question this, right? It's like we've set ourselves up on this path, for the first few decades of our life. And then we end up in midlife looking around being like, is this really what I wanted? Or maybe what I want has changed, or maybe things aren't working quite as well for me as I thought that they would. And so, yeah, the program's really an opportunity for people to go inward, to get to know themselves better, to get to know the things about ourselves that we're just not taught growing up, and that we weren't taught back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, whatever decade it was that you were born into. As you hit midlife now, we just haven't necessarily learned about like our mind. How does our mind work? How do we work with our mind and not let our mind kind of work against us? And how can we learn from the patterns and the beliefs that we have that we keep repeating, through our mind? I take people through their emotional experience. So, how do you learn to regulate your emotions? We've often get stuck because we've pushed down certain emotions or we haven't accepted certain parts of ourselves because at some point we were taught that it was bad or that we needed to survive in some way. So we start to allow ourselves to accept like our entire emotional experience. And I walk people through that. And then also getting to know our body a little bit better. Like, what is the wisdom that's coming through our body somatically? Because there's so much wisdom in our body that helps us to identify, like, why we might be getting stuck and what some of the root causes are of that. And so we allow the wisdom to come up through the body. And then I also have a module that takes people into their soul. Like, what is your soul essence? What are your soul qualities? And how do we start to shift away from maybe some of the things that aren't aligned with us anymore? And then start to shift more into our soul qualities. Like, what does it mean to express more of our soul qualities in the world? And so I just really walk people through this process. And it's a very holistic and compassionate approach to self discovery. So, getting to know ourselves better, but to healing as well, and coming together. There's like a magic that comes together, I think, when two sparks join, the world shines a little bit brighter. And we need that love and that support in order to heal and to grow. Because healing only happens in the presence of love. It doesn't happen in the presence of judgment and criticism and shame. And we need that non judgmental space in order to really open up to all of who we are. So I'm super excited about it. I can't wait I haven't officially launched it yet. So it's coming out this month. It's the official launch date is going to either be this week or next week. I haven't quite decided yet. Um, but yes, I'm very excited to take people on this journey of self-discovery and to get our lights shining brighter in this world. I really think that's what's going to make the difference to shift things in the direction of healing.
I could not agree more. And I love it. I love one of the things I love is just like how in sync we are. We haven't got to chat for such a while, and there's just certain terms that we kind of use that I think just line up, even though maybe we're kind of utilizing them in a little bit of a different way. And one of those is you're even calling this find the spark of your journey. And one of my favorite things to do when I'm working with someone, taking them through a process, in being able to help them start to create that realization in this life. Again, yes, we've been most of the time surviving in this lifetime.
Mhm.
And one of the things I like to say is that we want to start to find the things that are like our gemstones or that are sparkles in our life. I'm all
Ah.
like, I love that word. Uh, and then start to pave that path through it. So I love this because I'm envisioning that you're like creating the spark inside of people. And then, this whole idea of then they begin to create that spark out of all of the experience within the life. And that we start to map our road, map our path, map how we want to create this reality in there. And I could not agree more with the whole energy of love. It's just like once we bring the vibration of love in, that really, truly, our job is to kind of step back in some ways and let love do the work. That's what it's become such my favorite tagline that I've had some people say, we need to make t-shirts out of that. Just let love do all
I
the
will
work.
buy that t-shirt, Becca. You send me the link when you make it.
And
I
I'm
love
just like,
that.
it sounds so much easier than having to do all this hard work, right?
Gosh.
But I love this because it's like, it sounds great, right? It goes like, yeah, I want to live my best life. Yeah, I want to feel free. I want to. But really, what I find from individuals is that we have a feeling a lot of times of like, well, I know what I want, but then it feels like I don't know how to get there, or I feel blocked, or I feel like held back. And, is this course that you have just sounds like a perfect path for that. But just out of curiosity, just from the wisdom that you're sharing through, what do you think are some of the key things, the senses or the thoughts or that create the thoughts or the feelings inside of us that even bring us those feelings of feeling held back or like we're stuck or that we're blocked?
Mm. Oh my gosh, I feel like that's a multi-dimensional answer. Because there's so much, right? Like there's the astrology, and like the more I learn about astrology, sometimes you just have to surrender to being blocked. Like sometimes the energy, we live in a society that pushes us forward and it's go, 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 do the next step, do the next step, do the next thing. And we get caught up in that. And sometimes we don't recognize this stuckness as just actually our soul wanting to go inward and to heal something or learn about something about ourselves. And it's actually a blessing, the being like we're truly never really stuck. It's just kind of our minds tell us that we're stuck. So it's really a time to go inward and just be with ourselves, I think, when we start to feel that stuckness or become aware of that. So I think sometimes it's just the energies in the world that are impacting us. We want to be further ahead than what we are, but sometimes we just need to accept exactly where we are in the present moment, that it really is the pathway through stuckness is pure acceptance and having love for yourself where you are in the present moment. Um, and then the other layer to that is also it's our core belief patterns, right? Sometimes our body, our nervous system has been wired to not take those steps forward because at some point in our life, we tried to take a step in the direction of our soul and we were punished for it, or we were shamed, or made fun of, or criticized. And so our brain says, oh, don't do that again. And so this lives in our unconscious mind. We're not even aware that it's happening. So it just shows up as a felt sense of stuckness. And that's why the body is such a beautiful roadmap to lead us towards what is asking for healing. Because if you're feeling like you're jammed up, like you know what you want to do and you want to take that step forward, and it just feels like you can't for some reason. The process I take people through connects them with their body to get to the core of where that pattern was laid down to begin with. And then we do some healing work around where that pattern was laid down. Once that pattern's healed and we've integrated it and we give ourselves kind of that space or the healing that needed to happen, then it makes taking those steps forward a little bit easier. And what I like to say is that sometimes we need to learn a new skill in order to step forward. So we may not have learned how to be in our power, right? We may not have learned to stand up for ourselves or to set boundaries or to ask for what we need. And so sometimes we have to learn a skill first in order to move forward or to get unstuck. And a lot of times, again, I hear, just move forward, just do the thing, just get over it kind of thing. And it's like throwing somebody into the deep end of a pool who doesn't know how to swim. Of course, that's going to be terrifying, right? Sometimes we have to learn to swim first in order to navigate those waters. So there's a bit of a process to it that we can go through. And when we're really mindful of what's happening, that's what I help kind of guide people through that process.
Yeah, I absolutely feel that the body is paramount. It's key,
Mm.
and it is the one thing that we have probably been the most disassociated from. And I just have to giggle because you mentioned, say, maybe being raised in the like being born in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, or raised in these times, right? And it's like, I do have to say I giggle sometimes because I do watch how sometimes the younger generation will talk now, and I'll pause and I'll be like, there's no way you would have said that when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely kind of a giggle, but an acknowledgement that definitely there's a huge calling for so many of us to begin to have the permission to actually map out your own life, decide what you want to say, or have the courage to even have the permission to say the things that you have been really thinking. Now, I do think there's a bit of a pendulum swing going on right now, and that not all of the ways things are being expressed today are very healthy.
Mm-hmm.
That, it's not about repressing, but it's not about pushing it also on others as a demand. And
Mm-hmm.
that there is this really beautiful way of how we get to come into center within ourselves, that we get to start to calm that restlessness of what we need. How do we start to be able to have the permission to speak up without that voice in the back of the head that says children are meant to be seen, not heard? Let
We've
the
all heard
adults
that one.
make the decision.
Yep.
Go
Yep.
play.
Yep.
So as that happens, our a lot of individuals, our bodies have not ever been taught how to be validated. Like the feelings that come up have had to either be suppressed or ignored or something to that effect, without having the ability to begin to process,
Mm-hmm.
verbalize it, think about it. And I truly believe that our body is the new language.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, it speaks to so much, right? Like our mind is only aware of what it's consciously aware of, but our body has the awareness of everything that's unconscious, everything that we're not aware of in our mind, right? Our conscious mind. So our body really is a map to wholeness, I would say. Yeah.
It's such a neat gift because it is the part of us that I feel is really in tune with universal consciousness.
Yeah.
That on the lower or the anxious frequency bands within it. So, the stressors, the cortisols, and these kind of things within our body, I think are emanating, they're going to be emanating from the places where unhealthy processing
Yeah.
built up charge within our body that hasn't allowed the nervous system to make sense of what was happening.
That's
So,
exactly it. Yeah.
yeah. And so, one of the things, there's a couple points in this that I think are very unique. One of this is to realize that our ancestors didn't have psychologists and support many times to process and deal with things. It was like, it
Mhm.
doesn't matter. The garden still needs to be dealt with. This needs to be done. This needs to be taken
Mhm.
care of. There's no time to look at our emotions. Just, you got to survive. Just go do it.
It's all root chakra stuff. Yeah.
Mhm. And
Living with
so
that.
sometimes we're actually holding within our body, even if we look at this from the human design perspective, we get to recognize that no matter what we may feel as an eternal soul or as our spark, right? What our spark
Mhm.
wants, we're still riding our spark around in this body, in this
Mhm.
vehicle, and that it's actually holding the songs and the sounds of our ancestors.
Mm.
It's
That's so
all
cool.
of our genetics and our DNA is their songs, their stories. And many of our ancestors felt forgotten, unheard, and had every kind of range of emotion and desire within them. And many times, those very energies, if they aren't cleanly processed at the death or transition time of that ancestor, it stays within the collective field of the
Hmm.
family line or the family tree, if you will. And then we end up having that symphony living inside of us. So I think it's really kind of a neat perspective to also add to it that sometimes it's stuff that we may have gone through, yes, in our own life, in our own childhood. But sometimes the things that we're feeling that might be the apprehensions or the anxieties or the stressors or the worries or the habits might
Hmm.
still actually be coming from something or someone that isn't us.
Hmm.
And so when we start to get to learn to speak the language of the body, we get to now start to listen to the story, hear what it has to say. So exactly like you were saying, we get to figure out, where did it come from?
Hmm. Yeah.
Who's speaking? Where's the story coming from? Who needs the floor? Who needs the talking stick for
Who
a
needs the
moment?
love? I get chills when you say that, when the songs and the stories of our ancestors live in our body. That's something I feel like I need to sit with for a little while because my whole body just lit up when I heard you say that. And I'm going to definitely spend some time after our talk today sitting with that because I thought that was just beautiful. And the other thing too is that sometimes it's our past life that we bring forward right into this life that has those stories with it that keep us stuck as well. And I love that you're talking about what you're talking about because I think in the spiritual world, like as we've gone through, like you said, our ancestors were just living this survival mode. And then we started to realize like that we are spiritual beings and we start to leave the body to connect with spirit. And I think that has been great that we've done that because we've created all this awareness around spirit and soul and the universe and what's going on out there. Um, and there's this common term in the spiritual world called spiritual bypassing, where we just leave our human experience to spend time up out of the body with the spiritual world. I like to call it human bypassing, in that we're bypassing our human experience by doing that. And what I think we are stepping into now, or where I feel like maybe my calling is to help people do this more, and I know lots of other people are called to do this more as well, is that we need to start to bring our souls down into our body and have our human experience. And there is so much fear that sits in our body and emotions that we've been taught that were bad and we haven't processed or integrated. And really, the reason, I think this is why I want to say this, the reason why this is so important is that sure, we can leave the body and be in spirit and connect with the soul, and it feels all lovely and safe up there, but we're bypassing the power that we have. And the reason that we're here is to shift the vibrations of the stories of our ancestors, like you said. And so, unless we come into our body and we actually transmute those energies from the shadow into the light, we're just going to be stuck in these karmic cycles. And I know that that's what your program is about, is talking about these karmic cycles. And so did you want to speak to your program that you have as well?
Oh, absolutely. And at first, we have just got the most blessed conversation and confirmation, the little kitty, that is
Yes,
it
Charlie.
reminding us to come back into the body.
Yes.
That, one more thing I just want to say about the body, because I think this is where a lot of individuals are uncomfortable and have been trying to run away from the body because
Mhm.
we don't want to feel uncomfortable and feeling nervous or anxious, or that's honestly, I and this is just kind of what I have experienced through my years of doing this work is that I feel most predominantly that empaths, sensitive soul sensitive beings, light workers, indigos, um, this sort of soul coming in, the starseed souls, if you will, that have incarnated in, are coming in with such an openness and wanting to be heart based,
Mm-hmm.
that the predominant way that the nervous system has learned how to handle this reality is, or if you, from the polyvagal perspective, if you want to, is through shutting down,
It's
right?
safer, right? Like we
Mhm.
have to do something to keep ourselves safe when we don't have the understanding. And you mentioned that earlier, and I think that's so important. The
Yeah.
reason we do that is because we weren't given understanding to what we were feeling. And when we don't have understanding, all the brain knows how to do is to dissociate from it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there are, as a perspective from the nervous system, there's the idea of that when a trauma happens or something startling happens, some people will be reactive, and we might see that more as the fight
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
response, whereas there might be the flight. And then again, the other is the freeze. It's like the
Mm-hmm.
paralyze, it's like the disassociate, check out, I just left my body. And
Mm-hmm.
that is just one of the greatest themes I see. And what I find is that it's first freeze, it's first like poof, like shorting out, and then the next step is that the minute that the awareness starts to come, it's like
Yeah.
like I'm out of here, and it's just like I'm running away.
Uh-huh.
And when we experience that, we can start to have a recognition. If anybody finds that as your pattern, or maybe something you've recognized, where it seems like when stuff gets too much, or you find yourself maybe in an argument being the one that just shuts down or wanting to just leave, that's a clear signal that there hasn't been a way to feel safe,
Mm-hmm.
validating, being present in a moment and knowing how to process. And particularly with this energy in general, I love your kitty.
Yeah, he wants to be here right now.
Is that I find this is one of the key things that keeps us with very unhealthy boundaries. The
Yes,
the
yes.
the insecurity sometimes with knowing how to bring more of that. No, I don't agree to that, or I can see
Mm-hmm.
your point of view, but this is how I would choose to do it.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times, if we have been programmed to either freeze or run away, that we primarily have not learned how to speak up for ourselves
Mm-hmm.
or create our sparkles in life, right? Be a
And to
spark.
Yeah, and to love our like the worthiness to know that your voice matters and that it does matter that you're here and that we do need to see your like I always say your unique spark is really needed in this world and the world needs you to see like to be seen. And so the on this theme of stuckness, that freeze response can be another reason why we're stuck is that just that the nervous system is in a freeze response. Hi, Charlie. You can't
Well,
see him.
he's so
Oh,
cute. Well, you lifted
anyways.
him up once. That's so cute. But
He's
I'd
rubbing
also
up against the
say
microphone, but
the individuals that have experienced this process, I feel like your course is going to be such a great path to map that, because again, if we are freezing, it gets difficult to hold the energy with a feeling and stick
mhm.
with it. And
Yes.
that's where, we've talked about whether it's a friend, whether it's a coach, whether it's getting a session with someone, but having someone safe that you can be like, hey, there's something I know I'm avoiding right now.
Mhm.
Will you help me be accountable to not run from
Mhm.
it or just disassociate from it so
Mhm.
that we can be with it? Because I cannot overemphasize how important I feel, for us to really start to come back into our body, learn the
Mhm.
language of our body, start to learn how it is communicating with us. Because if we can start to understand that our body has been functioning at such higher advanced levels than we have in our consciousness our whole life. Because I invite any one of us out there to go ahead and try to manage the schedule for your heartbeat, or think, how all the things have to work together to heal or repair a cut or a bruise on your body, right?
So much
Our
going on.
body is amazing. It has survived us being in
Oh,
it.
that is a very good way of putting it, Becca. I love that.
So I just definitely
So
think that
true.
when we start to connect to the eternal or the infinite intelligence of our body, we're connecting to that aspect that is already in alignment with natural law,
Yeah.
universal law, nature,
Yeah.
and begin to hear that whisper again that's already leading us with the voice of love.
Mm-hmm.
How to let go. How to let go. Ask Charlie. Charlie will be like, you
Yes.
guys just make too much of a big deal about it.
I know. Oh my gosh, it's so true. And I love that you said kind of the freeze goes from flight goes to, but then there's a react, which you didn't say at the end too, like the, so when we start to unfreeze, we start to feel our emotions. So everything that we've been afraid to feel starts to come forward. And this is why it's so important when I teach my workshops, is I teach that we need to create a solid foundation underneath ourselves first, because this work, it does require us to be able to have a certain foundation of love for ourselves as we go through this process, because everything that's been under the surface is going to bubble up for us to be seen. And we really need to love ourselves through that process. So as we start to unfreeze, we start to feel our feelings and we're like, oh my gosh, there's all these feelings happening. What the heck is going on? And then, if it gets too much, we just freeze again. But as we start to, so we kind of run away from those emotions, right? But then as we start to feel things more, we might feel the anger and the rage for having been put in a box at some point. We might start to feel the helplessness, the hopelessness, the grief, all of like those really big emotions will start to come up, and we might start to react, right, in the world. And if we create a stable foundation for ourselves to go through the process, we can do it in more of an intentional way, that we can keep ourselves safe through the process, of going through that awakening as well. And the thing just to know again is like, it's okay to be angry. It's okay to be afraid. It's okay to have that grief of what it is that maybe you had a hope for that never turned out the way that you thought it would. As we turn towards ourselves, like I said, we can only heal in the presence of love. And that is when we start to integrate, we bring the anger into us, and we bring the fear, and we bring what's scary, and we start to nurture it. We give it the nurturing that it didn't get when it first showed up. And then we just feel at peace with ourselves when we're able to do that, because we're able to experience our whole human, like, I think what we've done a disservice to ourselves a bit in the spiritual world is that we've had this belief of positive vibes are good vibes only. And we, like, what I've been playing with lately is that all vibes are welcome. Like, we need to welcome those lower vibes. We need to shine the light on the shadows and love the shadows and allow those shadows to be there. When we do that, we can help the shadow along, so we can actually transmute it into something useful, and we can find those gifts. And this all comes from the human design work that you do, right? But to take those shadows, to love them, to make them our friends, the more we can make those parts of ourselves that we have dissociated from and shamed and put to the side, the more we can cozy up and love those parts of ourselves. Then it's all just sitting in this place of love. There's no right and wrong, good and bad. We're sitting in that middle point with everything. That's really where we find freedom. That's the pathway, I think, to freedom.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And I gotta say, you've also just created the perfect t-shirt. All vibes welcome.
Yeah, right?
Well, and it's neat because now it's not segregating and judging. It's kind of like when we start to get into a comfort and a groundedness in our who we are, that there can be vibes all over the place, but we start to
Hmm.
be within a place that our auric field now has our own discernment within it, where just because there's vibes doesn't mean you got to make them your vibes.
Hmm.
So it's not about trying to like shove some aside and make some better and control the vibe kind of that
Hmm.
thing. Whereas the more I think we hit into that neutral compassionate witness, or even bringing in that vibration of love, naturally, again, let love do all the work. The universe is going to harmonize. When we
Yeah.
stop messing and tinkering with the frequencies of the universe, guess what the universe is going to do? She's going to just heal herself, because we'll stop getting in the way. I think is a really major key thing. I do want to say one thing, just as maybe a thought point for individuals out there, because you said something so key, that it is important to recognize that there are all vibes, there are all ranges of emotions. That's part of being a human in this lifetime, is the spectrum that we have the ability to sense and experience. But
Hmm.
I do feel that, especially those that might be more prone to the freeze response or the disassociation, that there is going to be that next phase. They kind of do go in a tier or a phase. So it's first like the freeze, and then maybe you want to run away. But then guess what? Where do we run away? We run away to be in our car by ourselves, in our room by ourselves. And
Hmm.
then that's usually where the fight comes out.
Hmm.
And so a lot of times, I think this is something we can all acknowledge. We've done it sometimes. We've gone through a difficult situation. Somebody said something to us at work or at school or with family or in a relationship, and you just deal with it. And then you walk away, and what happens? Ugh.
Hmm.
And then the anger comes out, but it's not coming out in a healthy way. It's coming out in the closet. So it's
Hmm.
really not coming out.
Not being fully expressed.
No, because now all of a sudden, I know a lot of individuals have done this, where it's like, oh, I should have said this. So I would tell you no. And we'll have an entire replay of a dialogue over and over and over and over again, of how our true self would have wished we would have handled the situation. But I will pretty much guarantee that if you were in that moment, of all the ways you could have said things, put back into that scenario, it'd be like, oh, well, and we'd still tone it down and not
Hmm.
say exactly what we want to say. And that is coming again from an inability to feel validated for our own opinions, or being able to speak up for ourselves in these things. And it's not about having to fight our way into these opinions, but it's first coming into our own healthy validation of ourselves without needing that validation from anyone else. And that
Hmm.
when we become first and foremost our own champion, our own greatest, cheerleader, or support for ourselves, or recognizer for ourselves, validator for ourselves, that when we do things because it brings us joy, we feel proud, we feel good, we feel very happy that we did the things that we did without really getting the feedback from everyone else around us. Now we have more of a sovereign contained field that isn't being tossed around in this emotional sea as to whether or not, oh, they didn't like it, or oh man, they judged this thing I did, or oh, they weren't as excited as I wanted them to be. And
Hmm.
I'll give an example. Like, I remember years ago, as a parent, I had boys, so it humbled me a lot. But I'd be so excited for like birthdays, right? And I'd want to be like, oh, I'm going to make this whole thing, and I'm going to put balloons, and I'm going to do this. And I would like think out for a while the whole birthday party. And then it would come to the moment of the big reveal of the happy birthday.
Wah, wah.
Ah, awesome, mom. Thanks. Down to the heart. I would just be like, oh. And after it was me a while. After a while, I was all like, okay, obviously I'm making this whole big thing about birthdays because it makes me happy in some
Yes.
ways. And I get to share that happy with them, but it's not my job how they receive it, because they're it wasn't as big a deal to have the balloons and whatever else, So,
Oh man.
we have these kind of scenarios all the time. Some of them are
Mhm.
funny and fun, some of them might be really painful, but we
Mhm.
get to realize that when we start to have the way to look at where have I been holding myself back,
Mhm.
and again, I do think the key really, really comes back to starting to communicate to the body, starting to
Mhm.
let the body give the wisdom that it has locked within there so that we can hear it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's like you said, there's a language we can communicate with our body and we get messages from our body. It's going to be very clear. When you're in a situation, it's going to clamp up or tighten up or take on a certain posture. It's just building the skill of mindfulness, really, is going to be what helps us get more connected with our body. We need to be mindful of what it's doing and to not judge it. Like that's the whole point of mindfulness is we don't judge what's coming up. We just notice it and witness it. Um, and I do think what you're speaking to there too just comes with emotional maturity, right? Like we weren't necessarily taught at some point in our lives how to walk ourselves through those emotional experiences. And so when you were saying like how it like hurt your heart that your kids didn't respond the way that you thought they were going to, it's like being okay with that too, right? Like, oh, yeah, that does feel like it hurts my heart a lot. And like that's not wrong that it did, right? But then to talk us through the next step of, okay, like you were saying, like, this is my thing, not their thing. And you can still be as excited. That excitement doesn't have to go anywhere and just owning it as your own excitement, right? So we just need to learn how to walk ourselves through the waves of emotional experience that we have. And when we allow those emotions to come up, they just end up being blips on the radar and we can just keep flowing with them. One of the greatest lessons I ever learned is actually my cousin, who's a psychic medium, that taught me this. She said, emotions are just information. And once I learned that, not that it made things easier necessarily as things were coming up, but I had more mindfulness around this, that we don't have to personalize it as much. It's something we're experiencing, but it doesn't make you like a bad person or a good person if you have more joy or more anger in your life. Like we're all meant to experience all of it. And so um I like this kind of idea of depersonalizing things. And like I think that's what's really helped me is when I can think like, oh, this is a past life experience I've had, or this is my ancestors' pain, or I'm healing this for the purpose of healing the whole world. Like there's a greater purpose that comes with it too, right? So when we can depersonalize our experience a little bit, it's hard to when we're right in the thick of the emotion of it. But when the emotion passes and we can sit back from a neutral standpoint again, it's just realizing like we're all going through this together. It's not just like we're not doing anything wrong. I keep telling people you're not doing anything wrong. It's just the experience that we came here and we signed up for. So we just need to come together and support each other through it.
I love that. And, I love just the whole perspective too, that it is the experience or the journey, and
Yeah.
that's actually what kind of my course is about, as far as just a gift to humanity for us to be able to
Mm-hmm.
have an experience of really starting to tap into that eternal spark or that eternal nature that we are. And this course, it's called The Legacy of the Soul, because it's about us really starting to connect to who are we as a soul, who are we through our many incarnations, our maybe our many bodies, maybe our many star systems that we have been a part of, our greater soul's path or our greater soul's journey. And when we start to get to sense that, it starts to allow us to do exactly like you say, kind of take the bigger picture of what this experience or this journey is. Part
Mm-hmm.
of that greater picture is starting to remember that, well, if we have potentially had many bodies, many lifetimes, that we can realize who we are is more than the body.
Mm-hmm.
and that the body is a very sacred gift. It's a very sacred temple. I really honestly truly see our body as our vehicle or our spaceship, our starship. I
I
just
love
said,
it.
this is something I've always thought since I was quite young. I'm all like, I know this body does other things. I feel like we haven't been given the owner's manual to know all the amazing things our body can do.
So true.
And if people who are drawn to say like yoga or breathing practices or mantras or meditation start to realize those aren't just about calming the nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
Those are spiritual mechanics. Those are processes for activating different gifts and attributes that our body has. And part of
Mm-hmm.
what that attribute is so that we start to activate our body to our higher mind or our higher awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And we can start to recognize that aspect of ourself that is eternal,
Mm-hmm.
that is in this lifetime right now, but that at some point we're not going to be in this lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
I like to say, spoiler alert, we're all gonna it's the one thing, and it's the scariest thing. It's like the one conversation nobody wants to talk about.
Yeah.
No, no, I don't want to talk about death. I don't want to talk about that we're gonna die. Let's just focus on this right now.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas it's the one of the greatest moments of our life in this lifetime is how is our soul gonna travel or journey out of our body
Mm-hmm.
through this lifetime, because it is our soul, our consciousness that's eternal, not the body.
Mm-hmm.
And if we know how to activate the body so that it is increasing the energetic flow within it, we are increasing our ability to consciously travel when we leave the body,
That-
so that we're not just jumping into another lifetime, into whatever family tree we fall into.
Yeah. Well,
And
it's what comes up for me. There's two things when you say that. One, I've started to tune into that more, and there's part of me that's like, oh, I'm really going to miss this body when I don't have it anymore. There's like this love or this sweetness that I've developed for it. And the second is it's almost like we don't think anything of moving, like to move from one home to another home. You like you say, you map it out. Where do I want to live? I want to go to this town. I want to live in an apartment or I want to live in a house. We choose kind of where we want to move, maybe. And the visual I'm getting is kind of the same thing with our soul. It's like this is my house that I'm living in right now, but how do I consciously choose what the next steps or what the next path when I'm ready to move out of this house and into something else? It's that you, like you said, you still have your consciousness with you, right? When you leave.
yeah. So I've put together a course to really broach upon this very topic. It's a very delicate topic, and I try to make it as fun as possible because I think, the more that we start to face the fear we have around the idea of transitioning.
Yeah. I think it's so important. I think it's so important that we have those conversations. Um, you were mentioning earlier before we started recording, there's a freedom that happens when you accept when you accept that this is how life happens and how death happens, when we can really embrace it, you get to live life more. Can you
Mhm.
speak more to that?
Oh, absolutely. Because that's absolutely so the core of it. It's not really about focusing upon death. It's really focusing upon really realizing the natural law, universal laws, the cycles of life, death, and rebirth that are happening, and our part within it. And how did we come in here to be a gift?
Mm-hmm.
And now, as we start to tap into our eternal spark that we are, we realize that most of these insecurities, limiting beliefs, blocks, and things that we feel really insecure or held back by are actually inconsequential when we start to see them from the perspective of like, oh my gosh, I have this life. I don't have time to waste on being insecure about what somebody thought about my presentation. It's literally my passion to share this, and I'm going to share it. So we find that when we stop
I love that.
worrying about a lot of these illusionary insecurities or fears, we become more alive.
Oh, and this is
Yeah.
so exciting because I feel like this is all coming together right now. The stuckness is really the belief that we have that taking action is going to kill us. And
Yeah.
so when we can release our fear of death and we're not afraid to die anymore, then we're not afraid to shine our spark anymore. It just all kind of clicked together, I think, right there.
Yeah. I'm
Oh,
probably going to completely misquote this, but I think it was a joke by Jerry Seinfeld or something. And it's like this joke that the only thing that people are more afraid of than public speaking is death.
right. Yeah. I've
you
heard that.
and it's just this whole idea of just, the idea of like this, then other than the person in the casket, the next scariest person would be the one giving the obituary.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Mhm.
it is a way for us to see the irrationality of our nervous system,
Mhm.
that our nervous system has such a desire to feel safe that the idea of standing in front of an auditorium of people and giving a presentation authentically as yourself is literally one of the number one phobias.
Mhm.
And if we start to understand that energetically, what we are is we're realizing, okay, well, here we are in our little auric bubble. But if we haven't fortified our auric bubble to get all of our validation and all of our pillar of strength from our higher self, then we're over feeling all of the other auric bodies in the audience, and we're feeling overpowered and insecure or not safe.
Mhm.
And so there's an imbalance of the energy within there. And one of the things I like to share with a lot of individuals when I'm working with them is when we start to understand our nervous system and how it's really designed and how it's meant to protect us, the subconscious energy,
Mhm.
that if we can understand that even though we're an eternal spark, an eternal soul, right, we are incarnated into a body that's still very, very vulnerable.
Yes.
So the body had to have its own kind of safeguards and automatic programs in it until we got to developmental stages where we could either be nurtured appropriately or start to learn that path ourselves, which most of us have had
Mhm.
to do the latter.
Mhm.
But the whole idea is that we realize that a lot of our insecurities are not actually coming from us, but they're coming from the subconscious of our body that had to protect a very infant, fragile body that could not survive on its own without being accepted by the tribe.
Mhm.
And that if the tribe didn't like us and if we weren't good enough or if we weren't accepted, we were out the door. And as an infant, we can't survive. So it means death.
Mhm.
So there are base programs within us. Our number one need, and this is also part of the polyvagal system that I actually really, really love. I only lightly know about it, but I really resonate with a lot of it because it really shows that our nervous system, much like the human design system, shows that we have circuitry that is meant to connect with others.
Yeah.
And if we don't have healthy connection, we will feel as though we are dying
Yeah.
or not safe.
Well, and that's where I think chronic disease starts to come into play. Then that's a whole other video that we could do, but that really literally does start to, when we're not living our true selves, our body again is going to give us signals to that. And yeah, that's a whole other video that we could get into, but we do, in a way, the body does start to die if we're not fully aligned with ourselves. Yeah.
Absolutely. It is so imperative. And I think this is, really the work that we are doing is first and foremost to get in touch with our own truth, our own connection within our own heart, our own love, be the validation, have that connection to the body. That as we start to do that, we start to then begin to move a little bit more out again. Instead, let's go in to go out, where then we get
Mhm.
to start to recognize our eternal nature. We start to get to recognize that eyes wide open, so
Mhm.
that, as our third eye opens, the maya starts to dissipate, the illusion starts to dissipate, and we see the eternal nature, and we see that really these insecurities that we had are our own making. They are illusions, and when those illusions begin to fall away,
Mm.
freedom.
So beautiful. And that's the thing, as you do this, I don't even want to call it work, but as you make this a lifestyle to be mindful, to build the skill of compassion and love for yourself, it actually doesn't take a lot of work because that stuff starts to fall away. It's when we try to force ourselves to heal, like you can't force the path of healing. When we just start to have a daily practice of self love and compassion and mindfulness and objectivity to what's happening in our lives, as we build, like you said, that connection within ourselves where our auric bubble is self validated, everything else just actually naturally falls away. You don't even have to work or do anything about it. It just, there's kind of this moment that happens where it's like, oh, that doesn't even bother me anymore. Interesting. And that's what I hope for everybody, really. It's definitely a path to get there. It will continue to have triggers and things like that as we go down the path. But as we start to notice those and just change our relationship with ourselves. And I think that's really what this is about is, having a healthy relationship with ourselves so that we can be in healthy relationship with others.
Feel like that just said it all. Kristen, would you mind telling everyone how to connect with you and maybe
Yeah.
even find information about your course, or reach out to you so that they can get information to be notified when it launches?
Yeah, of course. So they can go to my website, which is www.soulinspired.ca, and just until I get my website updated, you can join the wait list and I'll let you know when it starts. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. And I would be so honored to connect with any of you if you feel inspired to take the journey of the legacy of the soul. That's available. You can find that course information on my website at withbecca.com. I also encourage you, if you want to be updated on any upcoming things, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. That is where I primarily utilize that platform to just let people know what is coming up. And I do present a lot of live events there that I would be so happy to have you join me. This has been such an honor to get to share this session with you today, hun.
Yes, this has been great. I always love our conversations and I always feel a little bit healed every time I leave one. So there's been lots that's little points that have come up that have shifted a little something in me. So thank you.
Likewise. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone for joining us. And we will see you at our next conversation.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Hello, beautiful star family. I would love to invite you to take the Journey of the Legacy of the Soul course with me. This is a beautiful way to really step into a life lived and not be in the shadow anymore. You can really, truly take this wisdom to find your best life now. And I would love to take that journey with you.